Brett Parris, Adjunct Research Fellow in Econometrics at Monash University, with a special interest in spirituality, recently gave a talk with the EA Centre for Christianity and Society, talking about the social cost of Australia's coal exports on the environment and the economy.
The US government have put together a very good technical paper which looks at what they call the social cost of carbon, which is, so what is, when you burn coal or oil or gas or whatever, when you release a tonne of CO2, what damage does that cause to the economy globally because of climate change? And these are ballpark figures, and they use actually very conservative models, but the ballpark figures that they come up with are, when you burn a tonne of coal, you inflict somewhere between 32 Australian dollars and 300 Australian dollars per tonne of coal burn. It brings together an awful lot of stuff, and based on very conservative economic models. So when we export 370 million tonnes of coal, we get revenues of about 49 billion. Profits would be much less than revenues. Using those US government figures, we're inflicting somewhere between 15 billion and 110 billion dollars in damage. One of the key steps we need to help get a more ecologically sustainable economic system, is to make sure that the damages from the goods and services we produce are actually reflected in the prices. And that's not a kind of a leftist or a socialist or anything kind of Marxist or anything kind of point of view. That's sort of straight down the line neoclassical economics, that prices should reflect the true costs of production and consumption. So at the moment, the problem what we've got is that because these costs have been externalised for so long and ignored, we've got quite distorted economies that we're burning much, much more fossil fuel than we should, and it's artificially cheap. So when people say, oh yeah, but coal's a cheap, good energy source, it's only cheap because we ignore the damage that it causes. The beauty, I suppose, of this US government report is, one is that it's not just an EPA report, Environmental Protection Agency report. It's included the Department of Commerce, Department of Agriculture, all these big heavyweight departments have distilled all this knowledge and these very conservative models and come up with these numbers, which are just eye-popping in terms of their implication for the damages caused by fossil fuel use. I mean, they're trying to get, we know that climate change causes economic damage. What they're trying to do is put some numbers around it. And there's this idea that coal is just absolutely essential for Australia's export future. Well, coal industry employs somewhere around 50,000 people. The tourism and education sectors employ somewhere like 900,000 people. It's like the figures are astronomical, so in terms of employment from those other sectors, and those other sectors together also make as much in export revenue for Australia as coal industry does. So we have other sectors that could be expanded. When we had the ice ages, they were like sort of 4 or 5 degrees below where we are now. So 4 or 5 degrees above where we are now is a totally different world. It's not like it's just a bit warmer and you need to run your air conditioner more. It's essentially a different planet. We haven't had 2 degrees or 3 degrees warming for something like 3 million years, scientists think. We haven't had 4 degrees for something like 10 million years. And we haven't had 5 or 6 degrees warming for about 40 million years. And that 40 million years ago was a period called the Eocene, and it was when the Earth was basically ice-free, and horses were about kind of this big, and sea levels were 70 metres higher than they are now. So we've got this huge threat. The impacts will come mostly later this century, but the window of opportunity to do anything about it is now. One of the analogies I've used previously is it's like It's like driving a fully laden semi-trailer down a mountain road. You've got maybe tons and tons of steel on the back of this huge rig, and you're driving down. If you see a bend in the road, you can't wait till you're in the bend before you start to brake. That's what people are basically saying. They say, "Oh look, we want to wait till we're really, 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 really sure. Once we start seeing the effects, then maybe we'll do something about it." But once you're in a driving down a mountain road, and you're already in a curve, and you want to wait till you're in the curve before you start applying the brakes, there's nothing you can do at that point. You're already committed. The window of opportunity to brake has passed and gone, and you don't get it back. And there's at that point nothing you can do to stop you going over the cliff. What are our ethical responsibilities to the poor? Because the big IPCC report that came out a couple of days ago, is again reinforcing the message that it's the poor that are the most vulnerable. The people living on low-lying river deltas, on marginal land, it's the poor that are the most vulnerable, and poor children particularly, and our own children and grandchildren, the future generations that didn't get a say in the last election. They didn't get a vote about whether we should be repealing the carbon tax or carbon price or anything like that. So there's ethical obligations against Christians to the poor, to the earth, to children, that have to be given much higher priority. The ethical dimensions of this are critical.
Anglican Media, Melbourne.